boy, a tomb, and a 3,000-year-old question. In November 1922, a sealed door in the Valley of the Kings had stayed shut for over 3,000 years. Behind it waited a secret. When the first light in millennia crept inside, it fell on gold. A king's mask, calm and eternal, staring back across the centuries. His name was Tutankhamun. He became pharaoh as a child and was dead before he turned 20. A god on earth, ruler of the most powerful kingdom of his age, gone in the space of a single breath. The question is simple: why? For a century, that question has haunted historians. Was it murder? An accident? A curse? Or something hidden in his own blood? Today, we open the case file on the most famous teenager in history and follow the clues to what really killed King Tut. Because the truth, uncovered by modern science, is stranger than any Tomb Raider legend, and it was written into him from birth. This is the story of a fragile king, a doomed dynasty, and a death that took 3 millennia to explain. The greatest discovery in archaeology. To understand his death, we start with the man who found him. Howard Carter, a stubborn British archaeologist running out of money and patience. For years, Carter dug through the Valley of the Kings, convinced one forgotten pharaoh still lay hidden beneath the sand. His wealthy backer, Lord Carnarvon, was ready to give up. Carter begged for one final season. It would change everything. On the 4th of November, a water boy's stick struck stone, not rock, a carved step cut by human hands long ago. They dug down and found a staircase, then a sealed doorway stamped with the marks of the royal necropolis. Carter's hands were shaking. He chiseled a small hole and held a candle to the gap. The hot air made the flame flicker, and then he saw them. Gold. Everywhere the glint of gold. Statues, chariots, strange animals. Carnarvon asked if he could see anything. Carter answered, yes, wonderful things. They had found the almost untouched tomb of Tutankhamun. More than 5,000 objects sealed away since the age of the pharaohs. For a king barely remembered by history, it was an unimaginable hoard. But the greatest prize lay deeper, still sealed. Behind another wall stood a golden shrine, and inside it, nested coffins like a puzzle box, guarding the young king himself. When they reached the final coffin, solid gold, and lifted the lid, they met his face, and the mystery truly began. A treasure house sealed in time. Before we chase his death, step inside the tomb itself, because every room holds clues about the king and his final rush to the grave. The first chamber overflowed with furniture, chariots, and statues, all piled together as if packed away in a hurry. Golden couches shaped like fierce animals lined the walls, meant to carry the king's spirit safely into the afterlife. Dismantled chariots lay stacked in pieces, gilded and beautiful, symbols of a royal power the frail king may never have truly wielded. 2 life-size guardian statues, black skin and golden kilts, stood watch over the sealed doorway to the burial chamber. Beyond them lay the king himself, wrapped in gold. But around him, the walls hinted that something had gone wrong. A small side room, the treasury, held a golden shrine guarding the king's preserved organs, watched over by 4 graceful goddesses. Here too were model boats, jewelry, and figurines, everything a god-king might need for an eternal journey. And poignantly, 2 tiny coffins held 2 stillborn baby girls, almost certainly the king's own daughters, who never drew breath. Those 2 lost infants may be the saddest clue of all, hinting the royal bloodline itself was too fragile to continue. Every object was a message meant for eternity. 3,000 years later, we are finally learning how to read them. Preserved for eternity. There is a strange gift buried inside this tragedy. The very care taken to preserve the king is what lets us study him today. Ancient Egyptians believed the spirit needed a preserved body to live on forever, so they perfected the art of mummification. Over 70 days, embalmers dried the body, removed the organs, and wrapped it in layer upon layer of fine linen. They coated the royal body in resins and oils, sealing it against decay, unknowingly locking in clues for the distant future. Those same hardened resins later fused the king to his coffin and caused real trouble for the first people to examine him. But they also preserved the tissue where, 3,000 years on, scientists would find fragile threads of ancient DNA. So the beliefs of ancient priests, meant to grant eternal life, accidentally granted something else, eternal evidence. The Egyptians could not save their king's life, but by preserving him so well, they made sure his story could never fully die. The Curse of the Pharaohs. Almost as soon as the tomb was opened, a darker story spread around the world. People whispered of an ancient curse. Legend claimed that anyone who disturbed the boy king's rest would be struck down by the vengeful spirits of Egypt. The rumors caught fire for one chilling reason. Just months after the tomb opened, the expedition's wealthy backer suddenly died. Lord Carnarvon was felled by an infected mosquito bite that turned to blood poisoning. To a shocked public, it looked like proof. Newspapers gleefully counted every misfortune that touched anyone linked to the tomb, weaving them into an unstoppable legend. They said the lights of Cairo flickered at the moment of his death, and that his dog howled and died back home in England. It was a perfect story for a world hungry for magic and mystery after the horrors of a world war. But it was only a story. The truth is far more ordinary. Most people connected to the discovery lived long, healthy lives for their era. Howard Carter himself, the man who actually opened the tomb, lived on for another 17 years and died of natural causes. Later studies found no unusual pattern of early deaths among those who entered the tomb. Statistically, there was no curse at all. Some suggested ancient molds or bacteria sealed in the tomb might sicken intruders, but healthy people faced little real danger. The only real curse on Tutankhamun was the one hidden in his own body, and to find it, science had to look much closer. Born into a broken dynasty. To find out why Tutankhamun died young, we have to rewind to before he was born, into one of the strangest chapters in Egyptian history. His likely father was the pharaoh Akhenaten, a revolutionary who tried to erase Egypt's gods and worship just one, the sun disk called the Aten. Akhenaten built a brand new capital in the desert, Amarna, and turned the kingdom upside down. Old temples closed, old gods forbidden. Art changed too. Suddenly, the royal family was shown with long faces, swollen bellies, and wide hips, unlike anything before. But there was a darker secret in this family, one hidden inside their marriages, and it would shape the boy king's fragile body. Modern DNA would later reveal that Tutankhamun's mother was not a foreign queen, but Akhenaten's own sister. Brother and sister. Among Egyptian royals, keeping the bloodline sacred often meant marrying within the family. For the gods, it made sense. For biology, it was a disaster waiting to happen. Every such marriage stacked the odds of inherited weakness a little higher. Into this world, around 1341 BC, a boy was born. He was first named Tutankhamun, servant of the sun disk. He entered a kingdom in turmoil, ruled by a father chasing a single god and carrying, unknowingly, the flaws of a tangled family tree. The Heretic Father. To understand the boy, we must understand his father, Akhenaten, perhaps the strangest pharaoh in all of Egyptian history. For centuries, Egypt had worshipped a crowded family of gods, with the powerful priests of Amun holding vast wealth and influence. Then Akhenaten did the unthinkable. He declared that only one god mattered, the sun disk, the Aten, and himself its sole prophet. He stripped the old priests of power, closed their temples, and moved the entire capital to a virgin site in the desert. For a while, the royal family basked in the sun god's light, shown in tender, almost intimate scenes never seen before in Egyptian art. But the revolution was hollow. The people clung to their old gods, the neglected army weakened, and the empire began to fray. When Akhenaten died, his radical dream died with him. Egypt was desperate to return to the comfort of its old ways. That burden fell on a small, sickly boy, tasked with erasing his own father's revolution and healing a divided kingdom. He abandoned his father's desert city, restored the old gods, and changed his name to honor the very god his father had banned. In doing so, he won back the priests and the people, but he also made himself a target for erasure by history. The empire he was born to rule. To grasp the stakes, picture the Egypt of Tutankhamun's time. It was not a fading kingdom, but a superpower at its peak. Its influence stretched from the deserts of Nubia in the south to the edges of the ancient Near East in the north. Gold flowed in from southern mines. Cedar, incense, and exotic treasures arrived from distant lands as tribute to the pharaoh. To rule Egypt was to command the mightiest army, the richest temples, and the most fertile river valley on earth. And at the center of it all sat the pharaoh, believed to be a living god, the bridge between heaven and the human world. His health was not a private matter. It was the health of the entire kingdom. A strong pharaoh meant order, harvests, and victory. So when that god-king turned out to be a sick and fragile boy, it was more than personal tragedy. It threatened the balance of the world. Every festival, every temple, every carved image of a mighty pharaoh was propaganda, hiding a simple truth. Their living god was mortal and failing. Ancient Egyptians believed a pharaoh's spirit lived on forever, if his body and tomb were prepared with perfect care. That belief is why they poured such wealth into the grave, and why, 3,000 years later, we can still read the clues they left behind. The Egyptians tried to make their king immortal. In a way, they succeeded, just not how they imagined. A child takes the throne. When Akhenaten died, Egypt was exhausted and divided. The great experiment had failed, and the kingdom needed a new pharaoh. After a brief, murky period of short-lived rulers, the crown fell to a boy of about 9 years old, Tutankhamun. Imagine it. A 9-year-old declared a living god, master of millions, expected to lead a superpower of the ancient world. Of course, he did not rule alone. Powerful advisors stood behind the throne, an old official named Ai and a general named Horemheb. Together they steered the boy king to undo his father's revolution and bring the old gods roaring back to life. He changed his name from Tutankhaten to Tutankhamun, honoring Amun, the god his father had banned. Egypt exhaled. Temples reopened. Priests returned. Festivals filled the streets again. To the people, order was restored under their young pharaoh. He married a young woman named Ankhesenamun, who was also, by blood, his half-sister. The tangled family pattern continued. On the surface, it was a golden age reborn. But beneath the ceremonial robes, the boy king's body was already failing him. Because Tutankhamun was not the strong, athletic warrior painted on his golden treasures, the real boy was something far more fragile. The fragile king behind the gold. The treasures showed a mighty hunter charging into battle, but his tomb told a quieter, stranger story if you knew where to look. Among the riches, archaeologists counted something odd: walking sticks. Not one or two, but well over 100 canes. Many showed real wear at the grip, worn smooth by a hand that leaned on them. These were not decoration. They were needed. Some Egyptologists once thought canes were simply symbols of royal power. But over 100 of them, many well used, tells a different tale. It suggested a king who struggled to stand and walk on his own, a pharaoh who often needed support just to cross a room. His tomb also held special seats, gloves, and even chairs designed for someone who tired easily or could not stand for long. Little clues scattered through a golden treasure, all pointing the same way. This king's body was fighting him from within. To find out how badly, science would eventually have to do the unthinkable. Look inside the mummy of a god without unwrapping him. But before modern medicine reached him, older investigators got to Tutankhamun first, and they left their own damage and their own myths. The murder that never happened. When Carter's team first examined the mummy in the 1920s, they faced a problem. The body was fused to its golden mask by hardened resins. To free him, they used heat and force, even cutting the body apart. In the process, precious evidence was damaged forever. Decades later, in 1968, scientists X-rayed the mummy for the first time, and they saw something that sparked a sensational theory. Deep inside the skull were loose fragments of bone and a dark, unexplained shadow at the base of the head. The idea spread like wildfire. Had the boy king been struck from behind? Murdered by a blow to the head by someone hungry for his throne? Suspects were everywhere. The ambitious advisor Ai, who took the throne next, the general Horemheb, even his own young queen. It was an irresistible story, a royal murder mystery 3,000 years old, with a crown as the motive. But was it true? For decades, the murder theory ruled the headlines. Then, in 2005, modern medicine finally gave Tutankhamun a proper examination. A CT scanner, the kind used in hospitals, would look through the wrappings without a single cut, building his body in 3 dimensions. And what it found put the murder theory to rest. Those bone fragments in the skull had not come from a killer's blow. The loose pieces were clean breaks with no signs of healing, and no embalming resin around them, meaning they broke after death. Most likely, Carter's team had caused them while removing the mask, or the fragments broke loose during embalming. Not murder, an accident, long after death. The great murder mystery collapsed, but it left the original question wide open. If nobody killed him, then what did? A broken leg and a fatal wound. The 2005 scan closed one door and opened another, because deep in the images, researchers found a fresh, serious injury. Just above the left knee, his thigh bone was broken. A clean fracture, low on the femur, that had happened around the time of death. And here was the crucial clue. A thin layer of embalming resin had seeped into the break itself. That meant the wound was open when he died. The leg broke shortly before death, not during rough handling of the mummy centuries later. For a fragile young man, a broken thigh was dangerous. In an age with no antibiotics, an open wound could turn deadly fast. An infection could race through the body in days. A fever, then delirium, then organ failure. A small wound becoming a fatal one. So how did a king break his leg so badly? One dramatic idea captured the imagination: a high-speed chariot crash. Picture the boy king racing across the desert, wheels thundering, then a lurch, a fall, and the chariot rolling over him. Some researchers pointed to crushing injuries down his left side as the kind of damage a chariot accident might cause. It made for a powerful image, a warrior pharaoh falling in a blaze of speed and dust. But there was a serious problem with it. Remember those 100 walking sticks and a body that struggled to stand? Could this king really have driven a war chariot at all? Many experts doubt he could balance in a fast-moving chariot, which needs strong legs and steady footing. The crash theory started to wobble. To understand why his body was so weak in the first place, scientists needed to go deeper than bone. They needed his DNA. Why a broken leg could kill a king. To us, a broken leg means a cast, some rest, and a full recovery. In the ancient world, it could be a death sentence. Egyptian doctors were among the most skilled of their age. They set bones, stitched wounds, and wrote detailed medical texts. They knew herbs, honey, and bandaging. Honey especially could protect a wound, an ancient trick that truly does fight infection. But they had no understanding of germs, no antibiotics, and no way to stop a deep infection once it took hold inside the body. An open fracture where bone breaks through skin was especially dangerous. It opened a door for bacteria straight into the blood. Within days, a wound could swell, redden, and fester. Fever would climb. The body would begin to poison itself from within. We call it sepsis, a runaway infection that shuts down the organs. For most of history, it killed swiftly and could not be stopped. Now add Tutankhamun's fragile immune system, already weakened by inherited disease, and the danger multiplied. His attendants would have prayed, applied honey and herbs, and watched, powerless, as the strongest man in Egypt slipped away. In an age of gods and magic, they could not see the true enemy. It was invisible, and it was already inside him. This is why a single fall, survivable for us today, could bring down a living god 3,000 years ago. And it is why his broken leg sits at the very center of the mystery, one blow in a chain of misfortune. The secret written in his blood. Between 2007 and 2009, a team of Egyptian and international scientists launched the most ambitious study of the royal mummies ever attempted. They carefully took tiny tissue samples from Tutankhamun and several other royal mummies, hunting for genetic fingerprints across generations. Their goal was twofold: map his family tree once and for all, and search his body for ancient disease. The DNA confirmed the shocking truth about his parents. His mother and father were full brother and sister. That single fact carried enormous weight. Children of siblings inherit two very similar sets of genes, and hidden weaknesses can suddenly surface. When both parents carry the same rare fault, a child can be born with conditions that would normally stay silent. Tutankhamun paid that price. The scans and DNA together painted a portrait of a body under siege. Start with his feet, where the trouble was plain to see. His left foot was deformed with a club-like twist and missing bone in one toe, making a normal stride painful or impossible. Worse, part of a bone in that foot was dying, a condition where blood flow fails and tissue slowly breaks down. This is why he needed those canes. Every step likely brought pain, and he could not push off a chariot floor to steady himself. He also carried a cleft in the roof of his mouth and a curved spine, more marks of a body assembled from a narrowed gene pool. Any one of these might be manageable. Together, in a teenage body, they meant a king who was chronically unwell and easily hurt. But the DNA had one more discovery waiting, and this one may have been the final blow. An invisible killer in his blood. How science cracked a 3,000-year cold case. For most of history, all anyone could do was guess. To truly examine a pharaoh, you would have to destroy him, until now. Modern medicine gave archaeology a superpower: the ability to look inside a body without ever unwrapping it. A CT scanner spins X-rays around the body and stitches thousands of thin slices into a perfect three-dimensional image. Suddenly, scientists could see every bone, every old break, every hidden flaw, all without disturbing a single ancient bandage. They could measure his age from his bones, spot his club foot, and find that fatal, resin-filled break above the knee. Then came the second superpower: reading the faint, fragile DNA still clinging inside 3,000-year-old tissue. Ancient DNA is broken and contaminated, incredibly hard to read. Recovering it is painstaking, careful, almost miraculous work. By comparing DNA across several royal mummies, researchers mapped his family tree and exposed the sibling marriage of his parents. And in that same genetic code, they found the fingerprint of malaria, the invisible parasite that helped end his life. Not every scientist agrees on every detail. Some debate the malaria findings, the family links, or the exact injuries. That debate is science working exactly as it should, testing, challenging, refining, always chasing a clearer picture of the past. But on the big picture, the evidence agrees. This was a fragile king, brought down by a collision of illness and injury. Piece by piece, machine by machine, modern science rebuilt the final chapter of a life lost 33 centuries ago. Weighing the theories. So let us lay the theories side by side, like clues pinned to a wall, and weigh what the evidence really supports. Murder by a blow to the head. The scans ruled it out. The skull damage happened after death, not from a killer's hand. A high-speed chariot crash. Dramatic, but hard to square with a frail king who could barely stand without a cane. Death by inherited disease alone. Serious, yes, but many people lived with such conditions. It alone may not have killed him so suddenly. The strongest case combines them all: a weakened body, a bad break, an infection, and malaria, striking together at the worst moment. No single villain, no single wound, just a cascade of misfortunes that a fragile teenage body simply could not survive. It is a less thrilling answer than murder or a curse, but it is closer to the truth, and in its own way, far more tragic. With the theories weighed, we can finally reconstruct the boy king's last days and see how the storm truly closed in. The perfect storm. Inside Tutankhamun's tissues, scientists found the genetic signature of a familiar and deadly enemy: malaria. Not just any malaria, but the most dangerous kind, the strain that can attack the brain and turn fatal within days. Malaria was common along the Nile, where still water bred clouds of mosquitoes. Even kings were not safe from a single bite. For a healthy adult, malaria was a brutal illness. For a weakened teenager already fighting his own failing body, it could be a death sentence. And here we arrive at the real answer. Not one cause, but several striking at once. Historians call it a perfect storm. Imagine the final weeks. A frail king, born of siblings, already limping on a dying foot, his immune system fragile. Then a fall and a badly broken leg. An open wound with no true medicine to stop infection creeping in. And into that weakened body, a bout of brain malaria burning through his blood. 3 enemies at once, and no way to fight them all. Anyone alone he might have survived. Together, they overwhelmed him. The boy king likely slipped into fever, then unconsciousness, then silence. He was around 18 or 19 years old, a god on earth, undone by biology his priests could never have understood. There was no assassin in the shadows, no curse from the gods. The clues all point inward, to a body that was fragile from the very start. His death was a tragedy written before his birth, in a royal family that prized sacred blood over healthy blood. The real face of the boy king. For centuries, the world knew only his golden mask, a flawless, idealized face fit for a god. But what did he really look like? Using the detailed scans of his skull, scientists and artists set out to rebuild the actual face beneath the legend. Layer by layer, they added muscle, then skin, guided by the shape of the bone and what we know of ancient Egyptians. The result was not a mighty warrior, but a soft-featured young man with a gentle face, an overbite, and large, calm eyes. He had the slightly rounded features and slender build of a boy who had never known hard physical labor or war. This was a real teenager with a real face who laughed and worried and felt pain, not just a mask made of gold. He would have limped when he walked, leaned on a cane, and perhaps grown tired quickly during the endless royal ceremonies. And yet, in his tomb, we find toys, board games, and even wine, hints of a young person who still tried to enjoy his brief life. Seeing his true face changes everything. He stops being a symbol and becomes a person, a fragile boy on a giant throne. That is the gift of science. It gives the boy king back, not just a cause of death, but his humanity. The rushed burial and the empty throne. His death seems to have caught everyone off guard. The signs of a hurried funeral are all over his tomb. His tomb was surprisingly small for a pharaoh, more like a noble's grave, as if a grander one was not yet ready when he died. Dark spots bloom on the burial chamber walls, paint that was sealed up before it could even dry. There was no time to wait. Some of his treasures appear borrowed or reused, hastily inscribed with his name over someone else's, a burial done in a rush. His widow, Tutankhamun, was left alone and afraid, the last of a fading royal line surrounded by ambitious men. A remarkable letter survives, likely from her, begging a foreign king to send a prince to marry her so she need not wed a servant. The prince was sent, but murdered on the journey. Her desperate gamble failed, and the old advisor Ai took both the throne and the queen. Within a generation, Tutankhamun's name was chiseled from monuments by those who wanted his father's heresy forgotten forever. And so the boy king vanished from history, his tomb hidden, his name almost erased. Which is exactly what saved him. Forgotten and buried, his tomb escaped the robbers who emptied grander graves. Obscurity became his golden shield across 3,000 years, until a stubborn archaeologist and a water boy's stick brought him back into the light and turned a minor king into the most famous of all. Today, science has done what no curse or legend could. It has given the boy king back his true story. Not a murdered god, not a cursed pharaoh, but a fragile boy who fought a failing body and whose death took 3,000 years to solve. If this journey into the past moved you, stay with the Clue series as we open the next great mystery hidden in the sands of history. The queen left in the dark. When the boy king died, he left behind a young widow, Tutankhamun, herself the daughter of the heretic Akhenaten. She had likely lost her husband, her 2 infant daughters, and her entire family, all within a few short, brutal years. Now she stood as the last thread of a dying royal line, surrounded by powerful, ambitious men eyeing the vacant throne. In a stunning move, she secretly wrote to the king of a rival foreign power, the Hittites, with a desperate plea. She begged him to send one of his sons to marry her, so she would not be forced to wed one of her own servants and lose her crown. The astonished foreign king, suspecting a trap, hesitated, then finally sent a prince. But the young man never arrived. He was murdered on the road, and with him died the queen's last hope of choosing her own future. The old advisor Ai, decades her senior, took the throne, and it seems the grieving young queen was married to him. After that, Tutankhamun vanishes from the record entirely. Her ultimate fate remains one of Egypt's quiet, haunting mysteries. Her desperate letter survives, though, a fragile clay voice reaching across the centuries, reminding us these were real, frightened people. How a forgotten king conquered the world. Here is the great irony of Tutankhamun. In his own time, he was a minor king, barely remembered, his name nearly erased. He reigned only about a decade, achieved little on the battlefield, and was overshadowed by greater pharaohs before and after him. By any measure, he should have been a footnote. Instead, he became the most famous pharaoh who ever lived. Why? The answer is that his tomb, unlike almost every other, survived nearly intact, hidden and forgotten beneath the sand. When Carter opened it in 1922, the world was electrified. Photographs of pure gold flashed across every newspaper on Earth. A wave of Egypt mania swept the globe. Fashion, jewelry, film, and architecture all borrowed the boy king's golden style. His treasures have since drawn tens of millions of visitors, traveling the world in blockbuster exhibitions again and again. The frail boy who could barely walk, forgotten by his own people, now stands as the eternal face of ancient Egypt. And thanks to modern science, we know him better than we know almost any ancient person, from his family to his final days. A fragile king, undone by his own blood and a cruel run of misfortune, yet somehow made immortal after all. That is where our case file closes, but the sands of history hide countless mysteries still. Which one should we uncover next? If you followed the clues with us, subscribe to the Clue series and let us solve the next great riddle of the ancient world together.